Right, everybody, thank you, and welcome to the Tynedale Local Area Council on Tuesday, the 10th of August. Just to remind everyone, mobile phones should be off or on silent, and microphones, I know it's a bit awkward sometimes, but when you've spoken, or if you're not speaking, can you make sure that they're off? Because it sometimes affects other people that need to speak. Okay, we'll go to number 2, item 2, apologies for absence. Nicola?
Chair, we have no apologies for absence. Everyone is present.
Fantastic. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the Tynedale Local Area Council held on the 13th of July 2021 will be submitted at the September meeting. Item 4, are there any disclosures of members' interests? Nope. Okay, in that case, I'll now hand you over to the Vice Chair Planning, Councillor Scott, to do the plan part of this meeting. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I would just like to go through the procedure of the Planning Committee. So, me as Chair will introduce the application. Then I'll go over to the Planning Officer to update us on any changes to recommendations and present the report. There's some public speaking today. Objectors will get 5 minutes, local councillors or parish councillors will get 5 minutes, and the applicant or supporter will also get 5 minutes. The 5 minutes will be split to the number of people speaking. No questions allowed to or by any public speakers. Then we'll go to member questions to planning officers. After that, we'll go to the debate. So before the debate, we'll need a proposer, a seconder, and then the debate. Sorry, I got a bit mixed up there. And then we'll go to a vote. So now I'll go to the first planning application, which is 20/047/02417/FUL, residential development of 9 detached and semi-detached dwellings, single and 2-storey plus associated infrastructure, amended description, land north of Lonkley Lodge, Lonkley Head, Allendale. So we'll go to Terry Sparkle to speak. Sorry.
That'd be Melanie Francis.
Oh, sorry, Melanie Francis, the planning officer.
Thank you, Chair. So the only update I have today is an additional condition from the LLFA, and that condition is any land drainage found on site during construction shall be diverted and reconnected accordingly. Where additional land drainage is installed, this shall connect to the existing underground storage tank. And the reason is to ensure the effective drainage and passage of groundwater to off-site sources in accordance with Tynedale Core Strategy Policy GD5 and the MPPF. I'll just move now to my presentation. So this shows the site on this location plan. The site's on the edge of the built-up area of Allendale as you approach the village from the southeast. It's around a ½ hectare of grassland with mature trees along the southwest boundary. The area of land lies between Dale Park, the small residential development to the east, and Lonkley Terrace to the west. And Lonkley Lodge, which is mentioned throughout the report, is in the southwest, just outside the site on the southwest corner. So here's an aerial view of Allendale. The site slopes steeply from the south to the north, and as you'll see from that photo, it's south of the marketplace in the centre, to the centre. The site is outside but adjacent to the boundary of Allendale Conservation Area, and the site's within the North Pennines A and B and within the Allendale Neighbourhood Plan area. So some photos of the site. So this view is taken with sort of marketplace to the sort of back to my back when I was taking the photograph. And it looks up Lonkley Terrace towards the site with Lonkley Lodge at the top of the photo. And this is 2 photos taken from within the site with looking towards the north with Longley Cottage, which faces Longley Terrace on the left. And then there's the northern corner of the properties on Dale Park on the right. And this is the view from the top of the site looking down towards the north and the centre of the village. Again, there's the same property showing. And this shows Dale Park residential development, which is located to the east of the site. So this is taken from the sort of western side of the site. And again, this shows from the properties, as you can see, the slope of the site, how it slopes from the south to the north. And this photograph shows Longley Lodge in the corner of in the middle of the photograph, and the mature trees along the boundary with Longley Terrace. And as Isaac's Well, which is not on the site, is mentioned throughout the report, I thought it would be useful for members to see a photograph of the well. This is listed grade 2 and dates to 1849. And as you see, it's a sort of stone trough fed by a cast iron pipe. So if we turn to the proposed site plan, I'm afraid this plan is quite busy, but there'll be another plan showing the landscaping which will sort of define the sites a little easier. So this shows the position of plots 1 to 9, which are found on the site. The proposal was redesigned to provide a more traditional format where properties would face the road, and based on sort of A and B design guidance. So the access to the site is to the north of the existing field gate. So as well as the houses located along the western and eastern boundaries, in the northeast corner there's a pond for water capture and an area of grassland. So the site will have a mix of properties built of natural rubble sandstone with stone quoins, lintel sills, rendered on some elevations, and slate roofs. And they have varying designs. Some include extensions and porches. The site has bungalows to the rear, adjacent to Dale Park. The rest of the properties are 2-storey, with 2 detached and 4 semi-detached houses. All the properties have garages, apart from plots 8 and 9, which have 2 car parking spaces. So we'll just go through the different designs of the properties. So this is plot 1, which sits at the front of the site and is 2-storey in height, with 3 bedrooms and a side extension and front porch that faces Longley Terrace. It has a garage to the rear, which is in the same block as that attached to plot 2, which is located to the rear of plot 1. Again, 3 bedrooms and 2-storey with a front porch. Moving to plot 3. This is in the northeast corner of the site. It's a 2-bedroom bungalow, 5.8 metres in height, and then which is next to plot 4, which is plot 4, which is again a 2-bedroom bungalow, but slightly different design to that of plot 3. Then moving further sort of south of plot 4 is plot 5, which is a 1.5-storey property with 2 bedrooms on the ground floor and 1 bedroom in the roof. And then do plots 6 and 7, which are 2-storey semi-detached with front porches in the sort of southeast corner of the site, with gables in the roof and attached single garages. Both properties have 3 bedrooms. And as you will see from the rear elevation, it is set down into the site. And then plots 8 and 9, again 2-storey, facing Longley Terrace, and are built to follow the slope of the site, with rear porches, and number 9 having a side extension. And again, both properties have 3 bedrooms. If we look at the proposed landscaping scheme, which I think more clearly shows the location of the various properties. So again, this would, following the sort of revisions on the site, a lot of work was done on additional tree planting, hedges and stone walling on the site to sort of get that sort of local get the local vernacular and improve the ecology of site. There's rainwater capture, different materials used for the hard surfacing, and again you can see in the sort of top left of the screen the pond and grassland area. And a couple of visuals of the site. These were done prior to the last of the amendments to the development, but the one on the left is looking up Longley Terrace towards, again, Longley Lodge. And you can see the proposed access with, on the left, plot 1 on the left, plot 9 on the right, and at the back of the site, the rear bungalow, the bungalows at the rear of the site. So the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions set out in the report and the additional condition recommended by the LLFA. The proposal has no objections from consultees, apart from the parish council, whose objection related to the underground tank and drainage problems of residents to the north and safeguarding the water to Isaac's Well. Following that objection, the applicant has undertaken investigations which shows that the discharge pipe flows into the existing 150mm diameter combined sewer, not Isaac's Well, and that works on the site would not affect the underground tank or the discharge pipe. Isaac's Well is fed by a drain that collects water from the Allendale playing fields. The site is a greenfield site and has been subject to 2 SLARS, the Strategic Land Housing Availability Assessments, and under the emerging local plan it's been allocated for housing of between 8 and 16 dwellings. So, and this, the SLAR assessed it as suitable, available and achievable within 6 to 10 years of the SLAR being assessment. Allendale Policy ANDB2 relates to small-scale housing schemes up to 9 dwellings, which this application is, subject to a number of criteria which have been set out in the report, including design and amenity. Overall, it is considered the principle of housing on this site is acceptable. The scheme has been completely redesigned since the first submission to make it more appropriate and relate to the vernacular and character of Allendale and the A&B. Houses now face the road as opposed to all looking inwards to create that more traditional view of the development. And there's been increased planting and landscaping. Therefore, subject to the conditions, plus the extra condition that the LFA recommended and the signing of the Section 106 agreement in relation to sports and play provision is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now go to public speaking. We have Terry Sparkle. Would you like to?
Hi.
You have 5 minutes between.
Chair, can I just clarify? Mr. Sparkle, I understand that you're speaking first.
It's Spark, actually.
Spark, sorry.
I think auto correct.
Sorry.
It's because that's
Spark. Mr. Spark, yeah, I think you're speaking first, and then Paul Barber is...
Yeah, I'm Paul Barber.
Yeah.
This is
Right,
Terry.
okay. So you're just going to follow on? You don't want any split? Okay. Right, thank you. Sorry, Chair.
okay.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I'm Terry Spark. This is Paul Barber, speaking against the development, representing other residents and owners that live and own property around the site. First of all, I'm going to talk about proximity. Only plots 8 and 9 have a rear garden of at least 10 metres length as per H32 Part E in the Tynedale local plan. Plot E 8 and 9 only have a rear garden if you consider their front garden with faces roadside to be the rear. So only 2 of the 9 houses meet the local planning criteria. H32 Part F in the Tynedale local plan requires 25 metres between opposing rear walls or 2-storey properties. Plot 3 to patio doors of 4 Park 13 metres, plot 4 to 5 Park 15 metres, and plot 5 to 6 Park 15 metres. Plot 8 to Longley Lodge 7 metres. The pond built up so ground level is level with the top of the existing dry stone wall of Almora, and hence looks over gardens and down and upstairs windows of several properties. The distance to the habitable rooms and the conservatory at Longley Lodge is not shown, but is certainly less than 7 metres. As such, the scheme is clearly not in the line with the policy H32 Part F in the local plan, which sets out a minimum guidelines to avoid overlooking and impacts on privacy for all parties, and sets a minimum distance of 25 metres between the rears of new two-storey dwellings and existing dwellings. Given the rural setting of this proposal, it seems clear that too much is being forced into the site, and the layout of the scheme needs to be reconsidered to reduce the impact on privacy and reduce the density of the development. We object on the grounds that the proposed development clearly doesn't meet H32 of the Tynedale local plan.
Okay, and my biggest concern all the way through has always been the flood risk. The site's not considered a flood risk area, but it's known locally that there's an awful lot of underground water at the site, and it floods at the bottom end on a regular basis. The application seems to have been sort of based on minimum amount of work on sort of tick box to get through planning, rather than actually looking at what's on the ground. And the first report certainly was carried out by two experts that were based in Manchester that had not even visited the site. So we felt the applicant wasn't taking into account the existing groundwater proposals and actually investigating what actually exists there. We know there's been work done on locating one of the tanks. We believe there are two in the field, but little other investigation's been carried out. But it does actually prove that what we're saying, that there are actually underground existing drainage within the field. It does actually exist. We told people about the tanks, and they were found. Locally, there's a lot of knowledge about the underground water, and it's all the way along that bank, all the way along behind Shilburn Road and Allen Fields Estate, where the ground changed. There's a lot of water coming out from there. So it's well known in Allendale. There's a lot of water in that area, and a lot of Terry's knowledge and my knowledge comes from the previous landowner, who gave both Terry and myself at different times access across the land to bring in building materials when we were doing works on our own houses, but he always did that under really close supervision, because he didn't want any of the existing drainage to be disturbed, because he was concerned about flooding, because it has caused problems in the past for houses further down the hill. So without the full knowledge being taken of all this existing groundwater, we believe there's a significant flood risk in doing a development on the site. And whilst the extra announcement from the LFA is welcome, it probably doesn't go far enough, because it's not just the tank where the water's getting out of that field. It's at the bottom end, and there's at least one other conduit that comes out of the field that's known about, that actually takes water from the field above, that runs through the field, and also from the field itself. So there's an awful lot of groundwater, and I think the LFA additional condition is welcome, but it probably doesn't go far enough, that it's not just the water that's going into that tank that's important, it's all the water. So if approved, hopefully we can get Northumberland Water to negotiate so that so that all these risks are considered carefully and plans are there. I think another concern with it was there's a big wide open space that looks like there's potential for future development there. It would be good if that, if the planning does go through, that is actually allocated as a SUDS feature and is protected as such, so that it doesn't ever get built on in the future. So overall, we object on the grounds that the current plans as they stand really don't take account of the existing groundwater at the site and present a significant risk to flood of both the properties to be built there and the neighbouring properties. Is that the 5 minutes? Sorry.
Thank you. So now we'll go to supporters, Andrew Herdman and Mark Goodson. You'll have the 5 minutes between yourselves there. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My name's Andrew. I'm was the architect and civil engineer for the project, working with Mark Goodson, who's a local contractor and developer in Tynedale. Really, we registered to talk just to address any specific points that were raised that we could respond to. In terms of the plot 8, the distance between plot 8 and Longy Lodge. First of all, the two built properties don't actually overlap on plan, so in any axis, so there isn't any specific policy in terms of separation. However, we did liaise and take on board the comments from the planning officer who asked us if we could relook at the design of Plot 8. And we did that, and we increased the separation of Plot 8 side elevation to the boundary by another 2.5 metres to give us about 6 metres altogether. So, and because Plot 8 is on a lower level, sorry, I'm not allowed to do graphic displays, but because Plot 8 is on a lower level to Longley Lodge, we there is no issue of overlooking. In terms of the and actually the landscaping plan that was shown on screen and in your documents, that was pre-redesign of Plot 8. So actually the separation is significantly increased from what's shown on the landscaping plan. In terms of the separation of the plots 3 to 5 and the properties in Dale Park, the properties in plots 3 to 5 are all single story to take into account the proximity with nearby properties. And my understanding, but I'll be corrected, is that there's no specific policy for single story properties and separation from nearby properties, and we have increased the separation following consultation with the planning officer. And also the landscaping will ensure that there is privacy to both existing and proposed properties. In terms of the site investigations, there was extensive site investigations on the property. We've been on the site. We've been there several times with and done physical excavations to check ground conditions, check groundwater levels, check filtration capacity, check the position of the underground water tank, and prove that the tank discharges into the combined existing sewer to the satisfaction of the relevant parties in terms of where that drains to. We are aware that there is groundwater on the site, and this is not uncommon with sloping sites. I've dealt with many sites where if you've got sloping land, water flows downhill, and so we're well aware of that there will be water to deal with. This will be dealt with firstly by excavations in themselves, create routes for water to travel, and that will then be collected into extensive SUDS features that we consulted at length with the or liaised at length with the LLFA, and we've put in place everything that they asked for in terms of SUDS features. And we also liaised with Northumbrian Water, and they have said that if there's no other feasible option, then they will accept 2 litres a second into the combined sewer. So the drainage is all designed in a fair bit of detail now to put restrictors on and zoned into 4 zones that will ensure the flow does not exceed the requirements. In terms of the people that did the detailed calculations, these are specialist drainage consultants. It's all they do, and they do sites all over the country. They take on board all the site investigation information, they take on board all the topographical information, and they were satisfied that whilst a challenging site, in the end we can control all the water and pass it into the existing combined sewer at the not exceeding the allowable rate from Northumbrian Water. I'm a local business, Mark is a local business. We do not want to upset local people, because the people that we sell to will live in the property. So
Okay, so
thanks.
now we'll go to members' questions to planning officers. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the officer for preparing the report and the speakers today. We've heard a lot there about the proximity between the buildings. Concerns been raised there. It is in the objections in the pack there. Is there anything you'd like to add, Molly, to what's been said?
The objector was talking about policy H32, and obviously that's been taken into consideration a lot of the distances listed in the H32 do relate to two-storey dwellings. So the dwellings at the rear of the site are bungalows, and that's why, you know, the distances are not as listed in H32, because that relates to two-storey dwellings. So we feel there's a sort of adequate distances between the various properties. Obviously, the objective in relation to Lonkley Lodge, again, there's no policy that relates to something. The policy plot 8, which let's just show you on the sort of landscaping plan. Shows it, does it? No, probably doesn't show it particularly well, I think. Actually, if you go back to, I think if you look at the proposed site plan, if you look at in your sort of pack, you'll probably be able to see it easier. The property is set back from Lonkley Lodge, and although it was acknowledged that you know, it is quite awkward at Lonkley Lodge because it has conservatory and windows on that sort of side looking into the site. You know, the plot 8 and plot 9 are set back from Lonkley Lodge, so we don't think there's, you know, issues of overlooking, and there's sort of you know, adequate amenity space for Lonkley Lodge as well.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Since we've got a Studs officer here, James, nice to see you again. Have you any comments to make about the drainage? There's been a lot said about drainage, etc. I know the field, it is a wet field. It's a wet area in general. Have you any comments to make?
Yeah, thanks very much. So probably the best thing to do is to maybe explain how the drainage is proposed and how it's going to work. So all the drainage on site will be positively collected via gullies, permeable paving, rain gardens, and that will all be collected underground, where new underground tanks will be stored, and then that water will then be disposed to 2 litres a second to Northumberland Water Sewer. What maybe is a little bit deceptive is on the plans you may well see the pond sort of to the northern part of the site. So that pond isn't connected positively, so the water from the hard standing areas won't go to that pond, so it won't be collected in that area. So that pond is purely for overland flows in extreme events. So it's there as a precaution really. So that's going to intercept the water in those extreme events, collect it just to provide some added protection to that particular area. There's as Melanie alluded to as well, there's lots of sort of planting which is going to assist with the drainage as well. And lastly was that additional condition with regards to if any land drainage is found on site during construction, that would then be adequately sort of reconnected back up. If you're happy with that additional condition, that'd be great if that was to be added on there. If you were sort of further concerned that you thought that condition didn't go strong enough, it could well be extended to say, along with any land drainage, we could extend it to any land drainage, watercourses, sewers. So if any features were found on site, they would then be addressed through the construction period and then reconnected accordingly. And with that all in there, we are satisfied that the flood risk certainly off-site won't be increased, but also on-site as well would all be adequately attenuated accordingly. That's sort of an overview of how it's going to work, and like I said, we're satisfied with the proposals that have been put forward.
Thank you. I think your extended condition, the condition that's been added on, yes, is good, but your extended one I think would sound a lot better if this were to be approved. Could I ask Melanie a question as well, please? Yeah. Melanie, where the pond is on the northwest side of the site, there's a green area there. What's the green area proposed to be?
So the green area is a pond and just a sort of landscaping and grassland. I know there's comments being made that it's going to be used for, you know, future development, but that is not the proposal. The proposal, as James has said, the pond has a purpose. The sort of landscaping is part of that site and dealing with any sort of overflows. And obviously, if this application was to be approved, it's approved based on the approved plans, and the approved plans show 9 dwellings only. So you know, if there was to be any sort of future plans for that area, obviously that would require a planning application to come in. But these are the approved plans, and the proposal is for 9 dwellings only and for no development in that area.
Thanks. I'm just rather conscious that the proposal is for 9 dwellings, and if it had been for 10 dwellings, there would have had to be an element of affordable housing in there, and I'm just worried that the applicant's playing the system, basically.
Chair, could I just come in on that? Just to give you some reassurance on that, Councillor Hutchinson, we, you know, if an application were to come in for that, an extra house, in the near future, we would be looking at that as a development of 10, and we would be looking at the affordable housing. We would be having conversations, because otherwise anybody could start to develop and manipulate the figures. So we wouldn't allow that. And just in respect to the area that's safeguarded there for landscaping, we've had some recent good appeal decisions from the Planning Inspectorate where development is being proposed, or garden extensions have been proposed on these safeguarded landscaped green areas, and the Inspectorate has upheld any decision that we have made, which is to continue to keep it as green space on the site. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Liz. That's very reassuring.
Councillor Morphy.
Thank you. I didn't read anything about solar panels or heat pumps or energy efficiency measures in the report. So I think they're going to have to be retrofitted at the owner's expense over the next, say, 9 years in order to hit net zero by 2030. And I appreciate it would be expensive for the developers to install these things, but could we maybe, as a compromise, ask them to install electric vehicle chargers at each property? It wouldn't be expensive, and because although there is a bus service to Allendale, it's not very frequent. I'm not sure how easy it will be for people to live without a car at these properties, so I think an EV charger would make a lot of sense.
Take that.
Councillor Horncastle.
Sorry, can we answer that?
Yeah.
I suggest that Matthew perhaps answers the issue on electric vehicle charging points and what the sort of general policy is at the moment.
The general current position is that for individual houses, we don't have the policy to require it. There is obviously things are moving fast on this point, so you know we're hopeful that we will have more planning assistance, if you like, to encourage either EV charging points or future proofing for residents to put EV charging points into dwellings. Certainly in terms of the layout of the drive and the parking areas, our sort of standards for dimensions of drives should allow for easy installation of EV charging points by users and residents in the future, in this development in particular.
Chair, could I just add again to this one as well? So, Councillor Morfitt, we don't have policies in place to require these. That's why the application is before you today without solar panels and other green energy attributes of the scheme. With respect to the electrical charging points, again, it's, as Matthew says, it's not something we can ask for by way of a policy supported decision today. However, we are finding very often committee members are asking for a condition to be put on, and applicants are accepting that as part of the scheme without appealing it. So it may be something, if you are minded to go with this scheme today, that you ask for a condition for the charging points to go on. But it is, as I say, it's not policy at the moment, but it's certainly something that developers have engaged with and are allowing on their schemes without appealing it.
Councillor Horncastle.
Thank you. Some of the questions I was going to ask Councillor Hutchinson has beaten me to it, because Ian, like me, knows this particularly well. I am concerned about the distances between Longley Lodge and Plot 8. Now, it has been answered, that question, but I've got to admit that when we start the debate on this, I'll be talking a bit about that. But getting back to one of the real local concerns here, we have this thing called Isaac's Well. So if you're not familiar with Allendale, Isaac's Well is a very sort of like historical little monument to do with the Isaac's Tea Trail. And it is got this constant flow of water to it. Now, James has alluded to the drainage on the site, but he never actually said that what he said was that if there was any drainage coming off the site, it would be connected up again. Are you specifically talking about any drainage that would go to Isaac's Well?
Right, so with regards to Isaac's Well, it's been alluded to that there is a tank at the moment within the field itself, which collects potential sort of groundwater via land drainage and then which feeds into Isaac's Well. So what I'm keen is that any water that's collected on site post-development, if it's from the hard standings themselves, is not connected to Isaac's Well. So I don't want all of that water gushing down to Isaac's Well and overwhelming it and causing the flooding issue down there. But any land drainage, so any water which currently falls onto the ground, naturally soaks into the ground and would currently find its way into that storage tank, is maintained post-development. So I want to separate out the water directly from the hard standing going into Isaac's Well, but any water that's within sort of the garden areas and any other public open space within the site itself, if that's drained via these land drains into that tank, that is maintained post-development, and that's what that additional condition hopefully alludes to in that sense. So if there is still that, so still hopefully maintaining that sort of source receptor model in terms of any water which falls on site into the tank will continue to flow post-development, but it still separates out the water going air sort of too quickly, so to speak. So hopefully that addresses that, but if you've got any supplementary questions, I'm happy to address those as well.
Councillor Riddle.
Thank you. My question is about the water as well. I do recognise that both the Lead Flood Authority and Northumbria Water have no objection subject to conditions. But, you know, I do take on the local parish council's local knowledge to hold that in, you know, quite high up in the hierarchy of things. So my question is really, you know, I'm a farmer, I'm old-fashioned, but 2 litres per second into the Northumbria water drains isn't very much water, really. You know, it's 25 gallon a minute. That's 10 small pails a minute. Are you confident that the other, like the pond, etc., you know, once that pond's full, what happens? Because to me, there doesn't seem to be a lot of leeway here.
Yes, so again, the pond is separate to the actual drainage itself, so the actual water itself will be stored via underground tanks and pipes, and they've been adequately designed to cope with that 2 litres a second restriction in place. So the tanks are quite large under the ground, so all of the water will be stored under the ground and then released slowly into the system, and that 2 litres a second has been agreed with Northumbrian Water, so it doesn't overwhelm their system going down. And again, if that system was overwhelmed at all, then that water would naturally flow into that pond. So it's just to say, if it was that exceedance event, that would be that exceedance route rather than straight onto the highway and potentially flooding the road in that way. So it's all been designed, the calculations have been submitted, and it meets the requirements that have been set out within the NPPF. So again, from our perspective and from a planning opinion, it is satisfactory from that perspective. Again, I appreciate the 2 litres a second. It is a slow rate. Certainly from a flood risk perspective, that's good because we don't want water to cause a flooding issue elsewhere. But I do appreciate when you do restrict things that slowly, it can potentially cause issues on there. But again, there is a condition which looks at the adoption and maintenance of those features, and with the actual pipe network, it will be adopted by Northumbrian Water, so they would be responsible for its ongoing maintenance from that perspective, and therefore they would be responsible for maintaining the hydro breakthrough restricted device to keep it to 2 litres a second in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Hutch.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for Liz, if I may, just to come back to the thing about the policy around the charging points in PV and ground source. It's not specific really to this application, but it's probably quite useful just to inform a general point. Is it because we don't have the legislative teeth, I can't even say that, to actually enforce these things, or is it because we don't have the policies within our emerging plan?
So we do have the policies in our emerging plan, but they're not there for us to put enough weight on to add as conditions at the moment.
So once the plan...
So once the plan comes forward, we can have much more focused conversations with applicants about the green credentials of sites coming forward, as we're doing anyway in readiness for the plan being adopted. But as I said, you know, you've got to be proportional, apply some proportionality here if you decide to ask for some green aspects of the scheme to what is reasonable for a developer, given that we don't have a policy to support.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Melanie, regarding, going back to the green area again, the pond, regarding the pond, if this were to be approved, are there any safety elements around the pond? Because children and water don't really mix very well. Is it just a pond, or is it fenced off, or is it what?
I don't. There's sort of been no particular details on that, but possibly if go over to James again on terms of suds ponds, how they're usually dealt with on sites like this.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. Unfortunately, in this instance, because it's not a suds feature per se, in terms of it's not accepting sort of. It doesn't have an inlet and an outlet, so it's not something that we've looked at in that detail, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, I don't have an answer to it. When we do, we have best practice guidance that we adhere to in terms of like the side slopes, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, having like a certain parameters. Unfortunately, I can't answer. I'm looking at the information I've got in front of me. I can't see anything there. I can certainly have a quick look at the information shared, see if I can find something and come back to you if that's okay. See if I can find something to answer the question.
If that was something that you were concerned about, we could certainly add a condition about what protective measures there were to go around the pond, and we could agree that with the developer prior to occupation of the dwellings.
That would be great. Just as I said before, children are drawn to water, and I used to play in water a lot when I was a kid. There was a lot of water up there. So if there was some sort of safety feature up, you know, to stop that, an accident happening, I'd hate to think if it was approved that there was an accident did happen. Thanks.
Any other questions? Do we have a proposer for this planning application? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, Chair. For the purpose of debate, move the officer recommendation with the conditions attached as indicated in the pack and outlined today. I knew you were.
Sorry. So that's to grant the conditions subject to the conditions in the report, the updated condition.
That's correct.
Discussed in your questions. So the first one is regarding extending the condition that Melanie read out at the beginning regarding the LLFA. Is that something that you want to put in your proposal?
Maybe small, I think, as well.
All right, so James, could you just confirm what that was?
Sure. So I think the amended condition currently reads any land drainage found on site, etc. So that now reads any watercourses, sewers and land drainage.
Any watercourses, sewage and land drainage.
Correct.
So that's the first one. The second potential additional condition that's been discussed is regarding electric vehicle charging points. Is that something that you want to put in your proposal?
I'll look. Is that a condition we can?
Yeah, could we suggest that there's, just to get the wording right, delegated authority to the Director of Planning with the Chair to add an appropriate condition to ensure that there is electric vehicle charging points on each of the units?
Well, happy with that in relation to the solar panels. I don't know if it's in keeping with that area at the moment, so I will not be pushing that one at this time.
Yeah.
So just the electric vehicle charging points. So to add an appropriate electrical vehicle charging point on each of the dwellings with the wording of that condition to be delegated to the Director of Planning. And lastly, the point about requiring safety protective measures around the pond. Is that something that you want to put in your proposal?
It is. It seems a simple measure to have, we haven't got the information at this time.
Again, I'm going to look to Liz for some potential.
Yeah, I'm just
wording.
thinking, to check, Melanie, is there a landscaping condition that we could add some wording to? So something along the lines of, we'll add another bullet to the landscaping condition for further details regarding design features of this of the pond feature.
There's condition 10.
Yeah.
About landscaping, which includes boundary treatments, so it could be added to that condition.
Yeah.
So Liz, just to clarify, would that go in as an amended condition 10, or would it be a standalone condition?
We probably put it in as an amended condition 10.
Condition
With some
10.
wording, we'll agree some wording with the director and the chair, so that there's some measures and drawings to be submitted to be approved regarding fencing around the water feature of the pond. Yeah.
So condition 10 to be amended regarding measures and drawings
Safety measures rather than fence.
regarding safety measures
Safety measures, yeah.
to be provided around the pond.
Yeah.
With the wording of that to be delegated to the Director of Planning. Is that?
That's fine, just need somebody to second it now, Molly.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hall.
Oh,
It's Councillor Homer. Right, okay.
So now we can go to debate. Gordon? Oh, Councillor Horncastle.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, right, this application. The application site itself is, it's identified by this authority as a housing site anyway, and it's an excellent site for housing. It's been described as on the edge of the settlement, but it's actually pretty central. It's only about 2 or 3 minutes walk to the main shops and post office, 2 or 3 minutes walk to the main bus stop, probably 3 minutes walk to the pharmacy, in the other direction probably about 3 or 4 minutes walk to the doctor's surgery. So it's ideally placed for housing. And like I say, it's been identified by this authority as housing, so the Prince development, that goes before it. But there are some problems on this site, but what I will say is I will say a big thank you to the Melanie Francis, the planning officer, being involved in this, because last year we were looking at a totally different application on this site, which was pretty horrible. It was a lot more houses. It was, I could use that word, okay, pretty horrible. And it was an application that was more of an urban setting. So thanks to Melanie for sticking to her guns and getting this rather nice development here now, although this rather nice development does throw up a few little problems. Why I mentioned the Isaac's Well thing is that locally, Isaac's Well is a big issue in the village and the surrounding areas. Now, I kind of know something about the drainage to Isaac's Well, and what it says in the report is not quite totally correct, where it says the water from Isaac's Well come from the Allen fields, plain fields. That's not quite the case. There's a little trickle of water comes from the plain fields, go to the Isaac's Well, but not all of it, because it just so happened that last year I met the parish council on that site with a local contractor after the water to Isaac's Well actually stopped flowing. And we found out that BT had nicely erected a new pole and smashed the pipe to bits. So we followed the pipe up right at the top of the plain fields, and there's an awful lot of water flowing in. So some of that water was coming from elsewhere, not the plain fields, and it was a heavy flow. So it may have been coming from this site, it may have been coming from the hill behind the estate, Allen Fields estate. So I'm happy that we've got something tied up that the flow that does come from elsewhere looks like it's going to be safeguarded, so I'm happy about that. I have spoken on occasions with Melanie about the plot 8 in front of Longley Lodge, and you know, we all know that neighbours quite rightly object if they've got something that's going to they deem to affect their house, and it does affect their house a bit. But and I have spoken a number of times, and if the policies deem that, you know, we can't do much about it, then we can't do much about it, unfortunately. But that is pretty unfortunate. I'll put Nick right on one thing. We do have an excellent bus service, actually. It's very frequent. So it's an excellent site. It does throw up a few problems. The other thing that I'm happy about is that it's 9 houses, and if it was ever the 10th one was to come forward, it would actually give us 2 affordable houses. So I don't think that's going to happen. It's a pity, because we're desperate for some affordable housing in the Allendale area. We haven't had any for about 10 years. So I feel for the objectors, because there's a lot of stuff on the local Facebook page. They put pictures on the local Facebook page of deer in the field, and they say them deer's field's going to be destroyed and all this, but it's a housing site. I do feel desperately sorry for the owner of Longley Lodge, because it does to him seem it's going to badly affect his house. I've checked it out. There's not much we can do about it. So all in all, apart from those few things, I think it's an excellent application. I'll be supporting it, especially with the extra conditions that's been put on.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Sorry, I'm just
Councillor Moore.
wondering if it's possible to ask about the condition on increasing safety around the pond, whether it could be conditioned that safety is increased but not to exclude wildlife from the pond. Would that be possible?
That would be taken into account, whatever proposals would come forward, we would be looking at that. That's why adding it in as a landscaping condition means that the scheme will be looked at as a whole.
Thank you.
So now we'll go to the vote. Can I just ask Melanie Bull?
Can I just say, Councillor Stewart has the right to sum up.
All right. Sorry, Councillor Stewart.
You know, I like to talk, Councillor Scott. But I'm not going to say much, because I think Councillor Horncastle summed it up very well. It's a beautiful part of the world. It's houses which are needed. And Councillor Horncastle has spoken for the residents there, because he's sense in this application. So, yeah.
So now I'll ask Melanie Bullman just to see what we're going to be voting for.
So it's to grant permission, subject to the conditions in the report, the additional LLFA condition outlined by Melanie at the beginning of the committee, which has been amended to also refer to land drainage, water courses and sewerage. An additional condition regarding appropriate electric vehicle charging points on each of the dwellings, with the wording of such a condition to be delegated to the Director of Planning. Amendment to condition 10 to include measures and drawings regarding safety measures to be provided around the pond, again with the wording of that to be delegated to the Director of Planning, and also a Section 106 agreement to secure sport and play obligations as outlined in the report.
Thank you, Melanie. So now can we have a show of hands for agreeing
the recommendation.
Agreeing the recommendations of this planning application?
Are you voting, Chair?
Yeah.
Councillor Horncastle, are you voting?
Sorry,
It's just you said you were supporting it and then you didn't have your hand up. Right, so that's unanimous.
So that's carried, thank you. We'll go to the next planning application, which is 21//00826/FUL. Proposed development of rural workers' dwelling, land to south and east of Northside Farm, Harlow Hill. can I hand over to Kate, to the planning officer?
Turn myself on. This application is for the development of a rural workers' dwelling on land to the south and east of Northside Farm near Horsley. We do have one update for members today who were asked to disregard the letter of objection submitted against the application as we've been unable to verify the objector's address. This is the application site. You can see the red line coming in, which is from an access road from the main road, and you can see the extent of the red line coming up there with the site outlined at that square right at the end. So you'll be able to see on the next slide, this is actually the complete holding of Northside Farm, which is 27 acres. The site is located in the open countryside and the green belt outside Horsley. You'll be able to see here that this is the extent of in the green line. There's a small area to the northeast there, to the northwest, sorry, and this is the extent of the holding there. And you can just see that it excludes these farm buildings, which are just to the west of the holding, which you can see there. So this is what's called their existing master plan. I'll go into more detail in the block plan, but you can see there that that shows the wedding venue, which is outlined in blue. The red building, which is the existing farmhouse, which they're using as an office. And then the yellow areas where the existing glamping pods and holiday accommodation are. So this is just a better view for you to see. The wedding venue is essentially this large area of buildings here. Sorry, my clicker's not showing very well. This large area of buildings to the left-hand side, and you can see. Oh, there you go. Here's my mouse. This building here is the existing farmhouse, which I've said it's being used as an office. The car parking area here is used for the venue, as well as the glamping pods, which are to the south here, and this area is used as the wedding venue. So this is just a better view. These are the buildings that I was explaining are excluded from the holding. This is the wedding venue. You can see here these are dictating where the glamping pods are, and also the 4 holiday accommodation places here. This is just a photograph showing you on approach to the site. So that's the wedding venue right in front of you, and the car park accessed off to the right-hand side, and the glamping pods beyond that. This is just a view from the other side that I've just shown you. So you can just see here, this is the wedding venue behind you. This is the toilet block with the showers and toilets for the glamping pods and the accommodation. This is all part of the venue, and then you can just see just behind this tractor here is the farmhouse. So this is actually the existing farmhouse on site, which is currently being used as an office by the applicants. This is just a picture on the left of the rear of those buildings, just to give you a better view of what's surrounding it. And then the right-hand side, that is the back of the farmhouse. So these are just to give you an idea of what's on site, if you don't know the site. The picture on the left is of the glamping pods, or wigwams, they're sometimes referred to, which are used for overnight stays for holiday accommodation, using the toilet blocks and things ancillary. And then these are the holiday accommodation buildings, which are more substantial on the right-hand side. So this is the site where the new dwelling is proposed. So you can see it's immediately adjacent to the existing farmhouse, and you know, within close proximity to the wedding venue. This is a summer house which is currently situated on site. You can see it in the background there. Again, this is just to show you the proximity of where the new dwelling would go in comparison to, so that's the existing farmhouse you can see with the solar panels on the right, and the building would be immediately adjacent to that. So this is the proposed master plan, if you will. So you can just see there where I've identified earlier the wedding venue, the existing offices, and then that's where the new building's going. This master plan also indicates a building, an agricultural storage building, which has been granted consent under an agricultural GDO application. So this is the proposed site plan. As you can see, wedding venue, existing farmhouse, and this is detached but adjacent to new 5-bedroom dwelling situated to the east. This is just a floor plan showing it's a fairly substantial building, obviously with accommodation over 2 floors. And these are the elevations, just to give you an idea of what it might look like. So, as I said, the site's in the open countryside and greenbelt. The holding at Northside is 27 hectares. The main issues to establish are whether there's an essential need for a full-time worker to live on site in connection with the rural business. So that is a mix of both any agricultural enterprises that they have and together with any other land-based businesses. So we're including the holiday accommodation and the wedding venue in our assessment. Officers are mindful that the assessment carried out by our independent assessor has identified that there is insufficient livestock to warrant or ever likely warrant, given the size of the holding, a full-time worker required to live on site. Officers are also mindful that the holiday accommodation can be seasonal and that weddings take place 40 times a year. These enterprises do not need someone on site at all times and operate as such without that presence currently. Whilst it might be desirable, and officers are mindful that there is a desire to live there, and it certainly would ease the applicant's operations at site, it's not been demonstrated that it is essential for a worker to live on the site, and the development is therefore inappropriate development in the open countryside and greenbelt, and no very special circumstance exists to outweigh the harm identified. Notwithstanding this, officers are also aware that there is not available dwelling on site for the applicants to occupy should they wish. Officers' recommendation is therefore to refuse permission for the reasons as set out in the report.
Thank you, Kate. We have Mrs. Lockie. Mrs. Lockie, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon. I currently own and operate Northside Farm alongside my husband. The farm was previously a mixed pig and arable farm. However, in 2010, we diversified the business. The business now compromises a wedding venue, glamping pods, holiday cottages and farm, which we've recently introduced livestock to. We've always reinvested in the business and the farm, growing and expanding steadily over the years. We have built the business from the ground up through hard work and determination. However, as the business grows, the demands and requirements on site have inevitably increased, making it more and more difficult to manage whilst not living on site. The lack of on-site presence is putting a strain on both us as a family and the business, and bringing livestock back onto the farm, there is an even greater security risk and essential need to live on site. We are passionate about our business and land, and we've poured everything we have into it. We've managed to withstand an 18-month closure as a result of the pandemic, which is a testament to how robust our business is, and we wish to continue to effectively operate. However, we now feel it is essential to live on site to do so. We began this planning process in 2019, seeking consent for a rural workers' dwelling, highlighting the need and requirement to live on site. However, during discussions with Melanie Francis, we were advised to withdraw the application and resubmit once we had brought the livestock back onto the farm, as we were planning to do so in our proposal. We therefore followed advice of the council's officers and proceeded to resubmit, believing the application would be supported. However, on submission, we have been allocated a new case officer who has raised new issues with the development, which were not previously highlighted, such as Section 106, financial contributions. We are frustrated with the inconsistencies and the ever-changing goalposts and request members to consider the merits of this case. The application seeks permission for the development of a rural workers' dwelling in the Greenbelt. Whilst we appreciate the importance of the Greenbelt, it is considered there is a genuine essential need for the dwelling on site, which would amount to very special circumstances. This type of development is supported by the NPPF, which seeks to support a prosperous rural economy and promote the development of land-based rural businesses. We feel strongly that the principle of the development is acceptable, as the essential need to be on site has been demonstrated and confirmed by Alan Jackson's report. We feel the officers should be looking upon the proposal positively, recognising the work and effort and supporting our rural business going forward. We are not seeking permission for a standalone dwelling. If approved, the property will satisfy a genuine essential need. The NPPF enables the provision of homes where there is essential need for a rural worker, and it is considered the development is needed to ensure animal health and welfare, deal with emergencies, ensure security on the farm, daily livestock management, and to manage up to 270 guests and staff as part of the wedding business. We believe there is no other suitable accommodation which could accommodate our family and the requirement to be on site. The Council's independent surveyor has confirmed they consider there to be an essential need on site. The evidence we have presented to the case officer illustrates that the development is in accordance with the relevant planning policy. The case officer states that he does not support our application as he does not deem there to be an essential need for us to be living on site. However, he states there is a functional need for us to be living on site. Yet the case officer is choosing to go against the advisor's findings and recommendations. I also find it hard to understand the difference between the functional need the case officer acknowledges we have and the essential need which he states we do not have, meaning that he is not recommending our application for approval, and we would like to seek clarification on these definitions. This is not a quick money-making scheme that we're looking to destroy the green belt. This is our livelihood. This is a lifetime work and dedication to our farm and business. I therefore ask members to support this application, my business and my employees. If approved, the development will be invaluable and will ensure the business we have developed can continue to grow and thrive. If members would find it useful to visit Northside Farm, we would welcome a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lockie. Now we'll go to members' questions to planning officers. Councillor Oliver.
Around the sort of essential needs, that's the whole thing seems to hinge on that. Can you just sort of give a bit of explanation? Thank you. Yeah, so the whole thing seems to hinge on that essential need. Could you give us a little bit of explanation as to why the conclusion that's been reached has been reached in sort of seeming contradiction to the independent report, and what the difference is particularly between functional and essential need?
Yes, sorry, the report is quite lengthy. I appreciate it's a bit complex. So what we essentially have to assess is whether or not it's essential for someone to live on site rather than desirable, and it's important to make the distinction between the two. So we use an independent assessor, Alan Jackson, who does a lot of work for us looking at rural-based businesses and whether or not there is a requirement to live on site. Now, he produces a report, and he does find that there is some functional need on site for somebody to be there, but he equates that to 0.5 of a worker. So we can't grant permission for something unless it requires one full person to live on site at all times. So what he's saying is he's had a look at all the identified need. Obviously, what he also looks at is how big the land holding is and whether or not there is ever a chance of it growing enough to need that worker on site. Now, what he's saying is, obviously, prior to the previous application, there were now livestock on site, and we're taking that into account, and he's equating that to 0.5 of a worker. He's also looked at the amount of land that they have available at Northside and said it's unlikely that would ever generate enough requirement for a full-time worker. So that's one part of how we're assessing whether it's required. Obviously, what we're looking at is not necessarily just an agricultural worker, but also a rural worker. So that could be someone who is land-based, and we're accepting that in this case, there is a land-based business. It's located there, the holiday accommodation, it has to be on that site. So we're also looking at whether or not there is sufficient requirement on that side, together with the agricultural, to make enough of a requirement. And what we're saying is obviously the business is operating at present without somebody living on site. I do appreciate that the applicants are finding that difficult, but it is absolutely desirable for them to live on site. But we wouldn't class that as being essential. The business can't operate without that. In addition, obviously, there has been some discussion about the property on site. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll look to establish whether or not there's a need. We're saying there isn't, in our opinion, there isn't a need on site. But the next step, if we had decided that, would be to look at whether or not there are available other properties either on or near the site. So obviously the site is located quite close to Horsley Village. There are opportunities to live closer to the site, possibly. But in this case, there is actually a property on site, which although is not desirable for the occupants to live in for whatever reason, there is an available house there. They are using it as an office at the moment, but it doesn't have planning permission as an office. It is a dwelling. It's a 3-bedroom dwelling, but they have applied in the past for prior approval to significantly extend that property, and they could do so again. So you know, unfortunately we've fallen foul on both counts there, that we don't consider there is a functional need, and also that if they did decide to live on site, there is a property available. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Councillor Homer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, because I actually drove round at the weekend and had a look at these sites just in readiness for this planning committee. How far is this from Horsley Village? Because I didn't really think it was as close as you're suggesting.
Sorry, I don't know the exact distance. Bear with me 2 seconds. Might be enough. But it's not within walking distance of Horsley Village. 7.45. It is, so it's it's well over a mile from Horsley Village. It's along the lanes. It's not easy to get to from there. So it is
It's a bit in the middle of nowhere to me.
I mean, Horsley is the closest settlement, so it depends on whether we were assessing that you needed to be there all the time, or whether or not somewhere in a property fairly close by would be sufficient to serve the needs required of the site. It's just we would normally ask you to assess any other relevant properties, whether it's done by a marketing research to say if there's anything else available. We don't have that evidence in front of us, but in this case there is a property on site, so that was unnecessary.
Okay, and just one other question about the tourism side of the business and the wedding side of the business. I'm assuming that they are all year round, whether they're being taken up on that at the moment. I mean, we don't know, we can't predict into the future, can we? But I'm presuming that all of that is available all year round.
Yeah, so there is no restriction, no planning restriction on what times of year they can do that, but by its very nature, obviously the wigwams and things are fairly seasonal, and the applicant has informed us, obviously it could change in the future, but they're doing about 40 weddings a year at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Horncastle.
Thank you. Kate, you mentioned a few minutes ago about the existing farmhouse, and you said that historically that applied for permission to extend that. What's the story behind that? So that obviously were refused.
So there is a bit of history to that property. It had been vacant. It had been tenanted and then it became vacant. The applicants applied to do a significant extension, which was refused planning permission. And then I believe that was dismissed on appeal. But they were then successful at a prior approval application, which is basically using their permitted development rights to do something very similar to what they were proposing earlier, and it substantially increased the property. So that's something that they would use to demonstrate that they can use PD rights to make a much larger property. So they did have that in place. That has now expired, but they could apply for that again, should they wish to do so.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just on the back of that, when it was refused the first time, why was it refused? On design or materials or what, or size?
It was the scale and the agreement. So obviously the property that you see in front of you is a 2-storey farmhouse. I'm sorry, I don't have the plan in front of me, but it was a significant extension and it was refused on design and size.
And this house now is being used for what? Office purposes, is it?
They're using it as an office, but as I say, there's been no planning permission granted for a change of use from a dwelling to an office. It's still available as a dwelling.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Just to put me out of my misery, it's the applications for a rural workers' residence, basically a farm worker. The size the place is, as has been pointed out, it really doesn't warrant a one. It's said to have 125 sheep, and my question is, and it could be a silly one, this is always a silly one from me, 2 shorthorn beef cattle herds. How many cattle are there in the herds? Or is it 2 beef shorthorn cattle?
Sorry, I can tell you that. Just bear with me 2 seconds.
Number 2, description of proposals.
Yeah,
First
I've got the numbers here. I've got them all highlighted because I had a feeling you'd ask. So at the moment there are...
Okay, on the microphone.
Oh, sorry, can you not hear me? So in the report it's stated that there are, and the holding at the moment, there are 16 Galloway heifers which have recently been purchased and will be put to the bull next year, calving for the first time in 2023. And the intention of after that is to rear the offspring from those cattle to about 20 months of age. They also have 160 lambs which they purchased in January this year.
Thanks. Just, it seemed rather vague, 2 shorthorn beef cattle herds. Could be how long's a piece of string.
Councillor Horncastle.
The glamping pods on the other touristy side of this, that's obviously proper use of things. Yeah, that's things you can actually do in the greenbelt, isn't it? The glamping pods and that.
Are you asking me if they have planning permission to do that?
No, I'm not asking you. I'm saying, can you, in the green belt policies, allow you to build glamping pods and other touristy associated things?
Well, the original permissions for the expansion was based on farm diversification back when that was granted some time ago. It is, it's not strictly, there's not a policy that strictly permits glamping pods in the Greenbelt, no, which is why you don't find them very often. But this one was allowed originally as part of a farm diversification scheme of Northside Farm.
Any other questions? Councillor Riddle.
Yeah, just looking at the floor plans, I am right in thinking that this is a proposal for a 5-bedroom house, is it?
Yes, it would appear so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So before we go to debate, sorry, Councillor Dale? Councillor Hutchinson. Horncastle.
You sat beside me month after month for years and called me Councillor Hutchinson. Well, that reminds me of the day I called Councillor Renner Thompson. I completely forgot his name and I said the councillor with the beard. So there you go. I was actually, I thought that there was the end of the questions. Were you going to ask the question, Anne? No. Right, sorry. I was actually going to make a proposal if there's no more questions.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to shock you all and go against officer's recommendation, and I'm going to propose that we grant permission for this if the other two reasons for refusal can be picked up, delegated for officers. So I'll tell you why. Right. I haven't been involved in this at all, but I took a bit of interest in this because it's very similar to one we've got in Councillor Sharp's area, where you've got a dual use here of a report that's done by the respected person, organisation you always go to for your guidance. And I remember talking to Alan and people in his area about an application that some of this got turned down. When you put two parts of a rural business together, it makes a business. But if you divide it up into purely 16 Galloway heifers and a couple of short-horn cows and 60 sheep, it doesn't. So the respected person that you went to for the report, and it's a pity the committee hadn't been given the report in this report, because at the end of this long report, Alan Jackson says, well, hang on, before I get on to that, well, actually, I'll come back to that debate later, but I proposed refusal and I've got some genuine reasons for it, so I hope somebody will second me. It's not refusal.
Yeah, just wanted to. So
granting it.
Yeah.
And I've got some good reasons when we get into the debate bit properly.
Councillor Horncastle, that's fine. What would be good before we go into debate and have a seconder, it is important that we just understand what your reason is for approving the application.
The trust professional you went to,
yeah,
says in his report, in the view that to cover the established wedding venue, lodges and glamping pod enterprise, together with a livestock enterprise, it is desirable that one full-time worker should be resident on Northside Farm to meet the existing proposed functional need. There is no existing suitable and available dwelling to meet that need. So this is the professional person that this authority has gone to for guidance and advice, and he's come up with something contrary to what's in the officer's recommendation. So that's my reason.
Sorry, could I just step in just to clarify for a second there? What you just quoted is important that he says it's desirable. not essential. And also when Alan does his visit, he comes out to the property and meets the applicants and what have you. He prepares his report independently of what we're saying to him. So when he's gone out there, they've obviously told him there isn't somewhere available on site because they've told him they have an office. But actually what we know is there is an available dwelling on the site. So although we are using his report, we are taking it as a consultation and then forming our opinion based on the other information that we have.
But you might find it's essential during the debate bit.
Can I just check, Chair, with Liz, or do very special circumstances need to be explored here, or is the reason that it's essential rural workers dwelling?
Yes, so Melanie's right. Obviously, it's entirely up to you what you want to propose, but just in the steps of coming to the decision, we have to establish that we do think there is an essential need, that there isn't anywhere else available on the site. And then if we think those things, we've got to be satisfied that it also presents very special circumstances in the Greenbelt, enough to outweigh any harms. It's sort of the three tests.
Councillor Homer.
Offering to second that recommendation.
Can I just clarify, Chair, that what you're proposing is to grant permission subject to any conditions required, because obviously there are no conditions proposed, and whatever is granted will need conditions, so that to be delegated to the Director of Planning in conjunction with the Chair, and a Section 106 agreement, just bear with me, requiring sport and play obligations to be determined again by the Director of Planning in conjunction with the Chair. And like I say, in due course, we will need reasons in respect of the very special circumstances where you have to consider harm to the openness of the green belt and the purposes of it. That's seconded by you, Councillor Homer.
Yes, do you want me to go into that?
I was just going to come in here and just try and capture what I think Councillor Horncastle wants as his reason for recommending approval, so that everybody understands what it is and that we've met all of what we say the policy hurdles are, so that what you're demonstrating is that you have considered all of the policy aspects and all of the key issues, and that you're coming to the conclusion that the application meets those tests and that it is acceptable. So I think the first point is, Councillor Horncastle, you're of the opinion that the application does meet the essential needs test for the fact that they have livestock coupled with the wedding venue on site, and based on the information of the report from Alan Jackson. So that would be the first, I think that's the first point that you're trying to make, and really the key driver to everything else that follows through. So the second issue is dealing with the green belt, and we would say it's an appropriate development in the green belt. So it's just demonstrating that you've understood the green belt test. So this application doesn't meet any of the exceptions, in which case it's inappropriate unless very special circumstances are demonstrated. Now, what you can say, and I think what you're saying is, because there's an essential need, it is a very special circumstance, and therefore it overcomes the harm of the green belt. So that would be the second way of overcoming the decision. Would you agree with that? Right, great. I thought so. And then the third aspect is that in order to make the development acceptable, there are 106 obligations to be met, and that it must include whatever we calculate to be the sport and play need that derives out of that. And the final aspect is that I'm imagining you would like delegated authority on the conditions to go to the director in agreement with the chair. So I hope members that you all understand that. Those are the key policy issues here, and it's open for you now to debate this and come back and discuss any of those key policy considerations. But that's really us just demonstrating with Councillor Horncastle how he's reached the decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just come back, I mean, on the recommendations where you've got the 2 and 3.
Right, okay.
But the reasons for refusal 2 and 3, they're an absolute must.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that worries me is if this was to go to appeal, I've seen it before, sometimes with if an inspector overturns a refusal here, they come back and there's nothing like these on. Sometimes people can get away without these things. We've seen it in the past, haven't we?
Yeah.
That's where the reasons go. So we are acknowledging that the applicant has accepted that they would be willing to enter into the agreement. So what we have to do is they go on as a reason for refusal so that the inspector is aware of it should it go to appeal. But what the general practice is that we can come to that agreement and get the legal agreement in place while the appeal's running, so that it's in place when they make a decision.
I think, Chair, just to clarify, the sport and play contribution is at 7.72 in the report. I think it's a total of £4,352, and that's split between sport and informal play, so it would be that amount.
So we'll go to debate. Councillor Dale.
Sorry, I think mine actually question coming from emanating from Councillor Horncastle's remarks. And I do note we've had similar applications like this before for actually farm worker, the farm worker's son, which has been turned down because there wasn't enough stock, etc., etc. So this is setting a precedent. And that is, in a way, a concern to me. I think one of the big things that alarms me is about the 5-bedroom house. I don't think that's a rural worker type of accommodation at all. And I have a problem with that, and I want to know exactly what your views are, because this will come back and hit us as a precedent for years to come. So I need to know that actually anybody who's got 68 acres can provide this, that, the other, can have a 5-bedroom agricultural dwelling, as this council will have to agree to in future if it meets all the other criteria, with have glamping in the garden, have all kinds of things. But I think we need to be very clear about this.
I am happy to come back, Chair, and just address that point, because I think that is important, Councillor Dale. We don't, just because it's an agricultural workers' dwelling, we don't expect them to live in a smaller house or a different type of quality. What the test here is about the essential need. And what we want is for you to, be assured that there is an essential need rather than the desirable need that we say that there is. So that's really the test. It is, you're right, it is a big family home. It's a 5-bed property, but that in itself isn't something that should be an overly concerning factor of your decision making. What we really invite you to do is make sure that you've satisfied yourself that there's an essential need here and that it is not creating an additional harmful impact on the greenbelt. And as Kate has reminded me as well, you've got to discount the farmhouse that's already on site and explain why you think that is not usable for instead of this application. Okay.
Can I just say, I think the important thing is going back to looking at all of these issues that moving forward, we have to deal with all types of planning commissions with consistency. And I recall a lot that actually have been turned down. Councillor Riddle is nodding in the rural areas. And at the moment, we have got all kinds of people with 68, 70 acres, who've got glamping sites and everything else. So we have to be very consistent about the policy we're agreeing to now, in case we set a precedent, which we might regret in the future.
Councillor Riddle.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with nearly everything that Councillor Dale said. I mean, I do hear what the planning officer is saying about we can't dictate what size a house can be, but the report, the crux of this is whether this is desirable or essential. And in my opinion, it's not essential. It might be desirable. Now, if it's essential to have a worker there, a worker doesn't need 5 bedrooms. You know, the argument is you need a worker there, not you need a family there. So to me, this just doesn't stack up, and it is, in my opinion, a way to get around the green belt and to get a house in open country. So, you know, I would be very careful here. I think it will set a precedent if we agree to it. So, you know, it's quite a small holding, and you can easily stack things up to make a business. But the crux of the matter is it's desirable and not essential. And there is a property on there that is being used as an office. Does it need to be that big of building to have an office for a business of that size? It seems a very large building to me.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask another? I know we've entered the debate stage, but because we weren't discussing any of those issues in the questioning stage, I do have one quite important question, which is, would an essential need be an exceptional circumstance in the Greenbelt in normal circumstances? So if it was absolutely nailed on, if there wasn't another house there, and Mr. Jackson was saying this absolutely is an essential need, which I don't think he is, but would that then overcome the Greenbelt concerns? Because I'm concerned that we haven't actually had any explanation of that, and we could be making an incorrect decision on that basis.
So yes, you're quite right. There is an exception in the Greenbelt for appropriate development, which would be for agriculture or forestry, but that typically means buildings for rather than dwellings for. So there is the stance that's taken is that there is no exception for rural workers dwelling in the Greenbelt. But obviously, we have a huge amount of Greenbelt in the county and land-based enterprises within that. So we have to have some capacity to allow it where we think there is an essential need, and it has been established previously that if they meet all of those tests that we've already discussed, that members have, in some cases, decided that that is enough to warrant very special circumstances, because they have had to meet a lot of tests to establish that in the first place.
That's great. So could I just sort of add my bit to the debate then, having that question being answered? It seems to me, I mean, I'd love to be able to support this. I think, you know, I really am in favour of developing rural businesses. But it just feels to me like the essential need hasn't been demonstrated, and we can't get past the fact that there is another house there, and that house could apply for a, you know, if it needs to be a bigger house, it could apply for planning permission. It could probably and get it. So it just doesn't feel, you know, the report doesn't say there's an essential need. It said there's a need, which is not the same thing. So and then potentially we get past that hurdle. If we did, we'd only have to deal with the house, and then we have to deal with the exceptional circumstances in the Greenbelt. So it's sort of 3 hurdles that I think we'd be kind of jumping over slightly with our eyes closed, and I'd love to be able to support it, but I just can't see that on the basis of the planning arguments that there's a really strong case for that.
Councillor Hutchinson.
I'm going to save a lot of time. The last 2 speakers said what I was going to say anyway, so thanks.
Councillor Waddell.
So as the County Councillor for the ward, I want to express my gratitude to the Lockie family, who've run a fantastic business. You know, they've invested in the local community, and it's a business that's pretty unique locally. I want to note that the officer's recommendation to refuse permission repeatedly states that the need to live on site is desirable but not necessarily, and that they've successfully run the business from off-site until now. Now, I understand that that wording comes from planning framework. However, I think it may miss that has impacted the family's lives, and that they've had to make sacrifices to allow their business to work for them while making a long commute and losing precious time with their family. However, planning must be guided by the policy, and while I feel sympathetic for the family's situation, this cannot be a consideration for planning. To allow this development on the Greenbelt, they would have to demonstrate special circumstances. In this case, I have to agree with the planning officers that they have not done this. The applicant has failed to demonstrate there is no suitable alternative, as there are houses already on site which until recently was rented out for habitation. Therefore, I will vote to refuse permission along with the officer's recommendation. I hope that the family can take on board the recommendations set out in the report and find a solution to this, as a 25-mile commute from their home to their business is damaging to the environment as well as their family life.
Councillor Morfitt.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with the last four speakers. I'm particularly concerned that the applicant drives a 50-mile round trip every day to check on livestock and attend to wedding guests. And I do feel it's important for them to live as close to the farm as possible, but I don't feel that there is an essential need to live on site which justifies the building of a new home. I feel that either converting the existing farmhouse or finding accommodation nearby would be better solutions.
Councillor Homer. Thank you, Chair. I'm just a bit concerned, really, that I feel that there's some bits missing from the report. For instance, you know, I said to you before, I've been out and had a look about the distance between the property and the nearest village. But just in terms of essential need, I don't feel that we're recognising that these aren't 9-to-5 services. You know, weddings, you know, by their very nature are out of normal hours. The tourism industry doesn't just happen during the day. Obviously, if you've got people who are staying on site, you know, that there is a need, isn't there, for some kind of contact 24 hours a day. And I just feel that that whole bit is missing out of the report. And we're not really acknowledging the 3 different types of business that these people are trying to run on this property. I also am quite alarmed at the line that Councillor Horncastle read from the report there. And I think it's okay saying, well, you know, when our independent inspector goes out, the applicant's got an opportunity to say whatever. But actually, that doesn't help us as a planning committee trying to judge, you know, what that end result is, if you like, from that independent inspector. And I just, you know, a bit like Councillor Oliver said at the beginning there, I just feel that, you know, I'm very much and always have been in support of looking after and safeguarding our green belt. But in terms of looking at special circumstances, there's a lot in the core strategy as well about promoting the local economy, particularly in rural areas. You know, I think you used the words prosperous rural economy, promoting tourism, and of course anything that promotes tourism outside of the coastal area and spreads it across the county, I think is a real positive. So for me, I'm not going to change my mind, and if Councillor Horncastle is still putting forward his recommendation, then I'm still willing to second that. Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, we have had a lot of similar debates to this over the years, but and I've got 3 or 4 in my ward who are currently investigating this sort of issue. What I'm trying to determine is, can you confirm this is 68 acres? Because earlier when somebody spoke at the start, I thought somebody said 68 hectares, but it's only 68 acres in total, isn't it? Yes, which is 68 acres. Now, the concern I've got is obviously you don't need a 5-bedroomed house for a farm worker. Is this for a farm worker, or is this application, and I appreciate I could have asked this at question stage, but it's obviously developed since Councillor Horncastle's initial comment. Is this an application for the family to relocate there, to run all of the business, such as the wedding venue and the glamping pods and the Shepherd's Inn? Because I remember going to look at this site some years ago, where a similar application next door, and other members in here will remember the same thing. And I've passed that site today on the way here, and I've seen this office house. Now, what I'm trying to establish, and I think it's very important to actually determine this, is the need. Is it agricultural work, or is it not just the family actually moving there to actually look after the stock? Because I noticed there's a sign being put for Northside Farm just below the wedding venue at now, which I've never seen before. This is a finely measured application, because basically, from my view, What I've got to balance up, do you need a farm worker for 60 acres, or can a farm worker come 20 miles? Or is this for the whole three enterprise, which Councillor Holm is getting at? That's the issue we have to try and determine as a planning committee. And I'm still not satisfied we've got their answers to this, because if there's a farm worker's cottage, is there an implication that that's got to be a farm worker, or can the family move in there themselves?
Yeah. So just to clarify, things have moved on slightly since we used to determine some years ago we had the PPS 7, which was extremely descriptive about what you could build in terms of a worker's dwelling. Councillor Dale touched on the fact of the size of it. There was outlined in there that it had to be, size was required in relation to the size of the enterprise rather than the needs of the applicant. Now, we don't have PPS 7 anymore. The MPPG is much less restrictive. It's based on the same kind of premise, but to assure you, we are looking at, as I said at the outset, that we're looking at not just the requirements of the agricultural holdings, but also the land-based enterprise that is there. So the wedding venue, the holiday accommodation, and the farming business all together. In terms of the actual property that they're allowed to live in, obviously, the requirement is based on one person, if that is necessary, having to be on site at all times. But it would be unreasonable of us to say that they had to live there alone and that their families couldn't move with them. So you do tend to see slightly larger properties so that a worker can have their family, which is entirely reasonable. In terms of the size of the building, which we touched on earlier, there is a tendency for us to look at the guidance is really anything between 150 and 250 square metres is something that's reasonable. This is around the 240 square metres mark. So actually, in terms of when you look through the report, the case officer has stated that he doesn't have any concerns, although it is on the larger side of what we would allow. It doesn't have to be commensurate with the size of the holding. It just has to be, as long as we accept there's an essential requirement, it can be anywhere within those parameters. So in terms of, in the defence of the applicant, in terms of the actual size of the property that's there, it is something that we could agree to if we had agreed that there was an essential worker for that size dwelling to be there. Does that make sense?
Still an answering question altogether. I appreciate the change of the policy.
Councillor Morford, did you? No. Does anybody else want to speak before we go to a vote?
Nobody else wants to speak.
Councillor Horncastle.
Right. I've listened to the debate and I see where some people's coming from, but you're getting hung up on a few things. A few people are getting hung up on about, oh, you don't need a 5-bedroom farmhouse for farm worker. You don't know how big a house the applicant needs. The applicants may have quite a few children. So you're not going to build a 2 or 3-bedroom house. You build a house what size house you need. And you don't build a house, 5-bedroom house for fun if you don't need it. It costs a fortune. So that's a need thing. So forget about the 5-bedroom. That's just a red herring. It says in the report that this is, at the moment, this business seems to be running well. It's sustainable as it is. Well, it's not, because the applicants live 25 miles away from this site. And they are not just doing one return journey a day. They are actually doing multiple return journeys a day. So if you start to add that up, you see why they actually need to live close. But you don't just need to live closer in the neighbouring village, because members of the committee, put yourselves in the position of the applicant. You're running this business. It's not, and don't get hung up on the 60 acres, because it's not 60 acres. It's a 60 acres and a wedding venue and glamping pods and there are tourist things. It's a far bigger business than 60 acres with some cattle and sheep. So put yourself in the position of the applicant. You run a wedding venue. So just imagine you've all been to weddings before. What's a wedding venue got? Very expensive equipment in there, audio equipment, lighting stuff. You've got hundreds, thousands of pounds of alcohol on site, champagne and all sorts of things like that. So you just imagine when you've run your, you've finished your business for the day, you lock up and you drive the 25, 27 miles back to Allendale, right next to that field we discussed in the first application, and you wonder if you can sleep safe in your bed at night. You've got people on that site living in glamping pods you've never met before. You're on the side of a, not far away from a very major road. That is why it is not just desirable, in my opinion, it's essential. And I think as far as the agricultural, this rural work is concerned, I think that's just a technical expression, because this is actually for the applicant, Alan. It's not for a rural worker to come and it's for the applicant themselves. So this is all part of what's happening in agriculture now. No matter what size farm it is, all farms are having to diversify. And large and small, I mean, there's that many rural television programmes on now. Everything is about diversification, and most of it's to do with tourism and tourist links issues like wedding venue. So that's what this is. It's a smallish bit of land with not a lot of livestock, but then you add together the wedding venue and all the rest, it becomes a profitable business. But when you read in the report, it's working all right at the moment. I don't think it's going to work like it is for much longer, because the applicant has a rather young family. It's getting, I can imagine it's getting to the point where she just cannot keep up with the constant to and fro. And when you put on top of that all the trips you've got to do for school pickups and things, the thousands of miles a week up. There's thousands, but certainly many hundreds of miles a week, when they could actually be living right next to it. I picked up on this because I read the report. Yes, it is desirable. It doesn't say essential, but I honestly think that I can understand where the planners are coming from. They have to see things in black and white. As a committee, you don't have to see things in black and white. Put yourself in the applicant's position. Would you want to lock up tens of thousands of pounds worth of equipment at night? In the early hours of the morning, drive home and just leave it, because that is the situation at the moment, and that is why I am very much supporting this application.
So now we'll go to a vote. I'll ask Melanie Bullman to explain what we are going to be voting for.
Okay, so it's to grant permission, subject to any conditions required, to be delegated to the Director of Planning in conjunction with the Chair, and completion of a Section 106 agreement requiring sport and play obligations, which is a total of £4,352, and for the reasons given earlier.
So to support this planning the recommendations of the planning application.
Support my proposal.
So the vote is, members, we need a show of hands for those that want to support the recommendation made by Councillor Horncastle to approve the application. Those against? So
that proposal fails, and we need a new motion.
So the proposal fails and we need a new motion.
I think Councillor sorry.
Councillor Hutchinson.
You're certainly ready for a holiday. Can I propose the officer recommendation, please?
Can we have a seconder? Councillor Waddell? Any debate? Councillor Hutchinson.
If Councillor
Councillor Morfitt.
Only that there's been lots of good points made, but I think we haven't really considered the fact that there's a farmhouse that could be converted on site. I think that's probably the crux of the issue in my mind.
Okay, Councillor Hutchinson.
That was going to be my summing up. I think that's the main thing, is there is already a house there which has been converted into office space. There's nothing at all to stop that, without planning permission, mind. There's nothing to stop that at all from being converted back to a residential, put extensions on it to make it into an inhabitable house. I see no reason at all to build another house, especially when there already is a residential house there. Thank you.
So, Melanie, do you want to explain?
So you're voting on that the application be refused permission for the reasons in the report. There are 3 reasons, 2 to do with not completing a Section 106 agreement in respect of sport and play, and also the principal reason that it has not been demonstrated that there's an essential need for a new dwelling for a rural worker at Northside Farm, so it doesn't meet the requirements of the NPPF and planning policies, nor are there any very special circumstances as detailed in the report.
So those can have, sorry, a show of hands in favour of Councillor, of the officer's recommendation. Against.
3. So that's passed.
So that's passed. So we'll go to item 8 on the agenda, planning appeals update, and this is for information. Back to Trevor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Scott. Okay, item number 9, date of next meeting. It shall be Tuesday the 14th of September at 4 p.m. And I'm sure Nicola will remember to put the venue on the agenda this time. Oops, sorry about that. Item number 10, there'll be no other business. We will close the meeting. Chris, end the feed, please. Thank you very much. Have a nice summer.